Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Demand Distributed Energy Market Integration Working Group. My name is Brenda Marquez. On behalf of the Stakeholder Affairs Group, we welcome you to the California ISO first kickoff meeting for today. We do have a planned agenda. Also, we do want to go over a few meeting reminders before we get started. As this call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only, any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. This meeting is also a way to stimulate dialogue and engage different perspectives. So we will be covering how our stakeholders can engage in both verbal and chat questions. As well, we also encourage comments to be professional and respectful for both our speakers and attendees. And then also, if you would like to refrain from repeating anything that was previously said, that way we can manage our 3-hour meeting time for today. To ask a question, you will utilize the open chat participant window on the bottom right of your screen. You'll be able to use the raise hand icon to be added to the question queue. Once you're added to that queue, you'll see your name located on the very top on the side corner, and then we'll be able to unmute you at your turn. We also have the *3 for those who are dialed into the audio only device, so you'll be able to also ask a question there. Before stating a comment or a question, please make sure to state your full name and affiliation before speaking. That will allow us to know who the question is coming from and your organization. And if you have any questions directed to technical questions, you can also send it to myself, but we also encourage you to send it to all panelists. That way our panelists are able to see the question that is asked. Our event producer is Ahmed, and so he'll be assisting us on the slides moving, and then we will be covering right now the agenda for today. Today we will kick things off with today's goals with Jimmy and Juan, who will be presenting on those. They are co-facilitators here for this working group series, and they'll be able to go into their introductions in the next few slides. And also Juan will cover the working group model and review that for us today. And then next we'll have Ansel, who will cover the reference material review. And then after that, we'll kind of go over the working group scoping with Jimmy. And then we'll have a few, like an hour or so to give a stakeholder discussion and feedback. And then I'll cover the next steps. Also, I'll be sending a few chat links that provide stakeholders the direct link to this presentation that was posted 2 days ago, as well as the initiative webpage, where you'll see a little bit of the timeline that we have tentatively scheduled for the upcoming meetings this year. And at this time, if we can go to slide 5, we'll cover right now the policy initiative stakeholder process for the proposal development phase. So at this time, since we are kicking off this call, we are currently working groups, and we're going to work on those working groups to go to the next step, which is the issue paper and then the draw proposal. But at this time, our team will kind of cover the principles and those items that are required for the working groups to help us get there on this pace, for sure. And then the next slide, if we can. And we can go ahead and welcome and have Juan. And I do see you clearly on your screen. Test audio.
All right, very good. Yep, thank you, Brenda. All right, thanks for the thumbs up there. So as Brenda mentioned, welcome to the Demand Distributed Energy Market Integration Working Group. This working group has been formed really to be responsive to the stakeholder desire we heard through the 2024 roadmap and catalog process to continue the demand and DER market participation model and policy design discussions, and to do so via a stakeholder-driven process. So we're here to really hit 2 primary aims, and that's number 1, to promote a shared understanding of what is currently the options of market participation for both demand and distributed energy resources, and then based off of that and kind of leapfrogging off of that rather, continue and allow for that discussion on the potential for any new enhancements or approaches for both the integrated supply side and demand side participation of these resources to be reflected into the market. And so let's go ahead and move to the next slide real quick, if you don't mind, Ahmed. I'm going to be covering, I think it's really important for us to try to keep this conversation moving, try to keep momentum in this conversation. So let's open up with what are the goals of today's call. So I'm going to be covering the working group in a little bit more detail. I'm aware that we have several parties here from kind of the DR space that maybe have not engaged in working groups throughout the last year and a half to 2 years here at the ISO. So we want to make sure that you have a key understanding of the working group model, what you can expect. We'll cover some timelines and really some of the lessons learned that we've had over the last 2 years of launching this kind of stakeholder-driven process and the roles and deliverables that will result from this working group. This working groups in general are meant to really allow for quite a bit of organic conversation to happen. So raise that hand, put something in chat, do not hesitate as we kind of move on in this working group. We're going to get a little bit more granular into some of the discussion topics. You know, I'm not very shy. I might call on you. We might use polling, right? We're really looking for engagement and to have you, the stakeholders, have a big part in driving the direction of this scoping effort that will ultimately lead to market policy design. We're also then going to hand it off to Ansel, as Brenda mentioned, to review some of the reference material that is currently out there. We're going to highlight both current and some forthcoming educational and reference material that will be available to you around the demand response and distributed energy resource participation models. This is to ensure that we can have really robust discussion in future working group sessions. That is not to say that I want everyone to feel very comfortable in asking any kind of clarifying question that they may need in this conversation. But we also want to be able to provide something to you in somewhat of an offline modality so that you can get yourself really acquainted with the let's call it foundational level reference material so that we can really start talking about any potential changes that the stakeholder community is looking for in this area. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about working group scoping, and this is somewhat of a will be an ongoing bullet in today's goals, right? Because that is really kind of the primary point of this effort here. So we'll be going over some of the proposed principles, the items that we want to make sure that we're taking a look at any potential problem statements or proposed solutions through the lens of these principles. And then also we'll be going through that interplay of the policy catalog process and then this working group. Again, this working group was one that came from the 2024 roadmap and policy catalog process, and there is an interplay with the ongoing efforts of 2025. So we'll be outlining that in greater detail. And then as always, or as you will grow accustomed to, we will end with just stakeholder discussion, right? Any of those any feedback that you may have on the proposed working group items that were covered today, that would be for the working group plan, and really just to address any open questions. So if we could go ahead and move to the next slide, please. All right, so again, for those of you who have participated in our working groups, we appreciate your continued engagement. For those of you who are new to it, we appreciate your new engagement. So let's talk a little bit about what the working group model is. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So from the ISO side, we want to really kind of clearly define to you our roles, right? So the working group was something that we launched. We'll have a facilitator, we'll have a scribe. We're joined by all of our subject matter experts here from the California ISO, and then arguably the most important role here, you, the working group participants. So Jimmy Bashara and myself will be co-facilitating this. The facilitator is really kind of managing the working group as the designated ISO facilitator. We're responsible for guiding that discussion on those principles, problem statements, and subsequent prioritization of which issues we'll be tackling. We will also have a designated scribe. We do post all of our meeting material and our recordings, but we want to make sure that we have an individual who's responsible for capturing the evolution of the discussion that takes place amongst the stakeholder community here, and we'll be able to publish meeting summaries and also capture action items. I'll get into a little bit more detail what an action item might be coming out of the working group, and they're working very closely with the facilitator. So we're also joined by our subject matter experts, right? So we have Ansel Lundberg here. You'll see him on video. We have Jill Powers here. We also have everything that we take back from these sessions, a host of subject matter experts within the ISO, and they're able to provide that in-depth knowledge and expertise they have in this specific sector, and make sure that we can deliver, up-to-date information and really kind of advise on any of those deliverables that together our stakeholder community here on this call will come up with for the Demand and Distributed Energy Market Integration Working Group. We will come up with a catchy acronym that is maybe 2 syllables because that's a mouthful. We're open to your feedback on that. They are ultimately also responsible for the development of the market policies and procedures that will come out of the policy effort that's informed by this working group and your input as stakeholders as we kind of move through this process. And then again, yourselves, you're the working group participants. You are here to provide, not only any clarifying questions you may have, but your ideas, your proposals, your input. You help us vet through the different problem statements and potential solutions that we'll be exploring in this working group. There will be opportunities for stakeholders to present throughout this working group effort. And so we're really here kind of at your service, so to speak. Working groups are open to all stakeholders. We run an open stakeholder process here. And ISO staff, that's one of the key things of Jimmy Bashara and myself being facilitators, ISO staff, there will also be participants in the working group, right? And I think together we can make sure that we drive towards any potential changes for the future that are really in line with the principles that we'll decide together, as well as the feedback that we receive from you. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce the team here. You'll hear from everybody, but again, we have Jill Powers, who is our DR and DER sector manager, part of the Market Policy Development Group. We have Ansel Lundberg, who's also a policy developer, and he's the working group policy lead, part of that subject matter expertise. We have Jimmy Bashara and myself, we're account managers. We're part of the stakeholder engagement team here at the ISO. We'll be co-facilitating this effort, and we're also joined by Brenda, who opened up this call for us, and she will be serving as the scribe for this team. And so we're all here together and looking forward to diving into this conversation with you guys further. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So I wanted to give just kind of a visual progression of the working group process, and you'll see the we are here, right? We love to use this little arrow. Let's keep mind and frame where we are. We're at the very beginning, and so we will be tackling principles here today. Again, we view these potential problem statements that you see as the next step, the vetting of those problem statements, and ultimately a resolution, a proposed solution, policy design through the lens of these principles. I do want to say that these principles are really, we want to make sure we capture the spirit of these principles. We don't want to get lost in the wordsmithing of something very precise. What we're looking for here is just good market design as it relates to demand response and distributed energy resource market integration. And we have a couple of principles that we'd like to present to you, and we'd like to hear your feedback on this, but we're eager to get some alignment on those and then move on to the problem statements that we've already received via the catalog. And then, of course, we are open to new problem statements or issue identification from this community, and Jimmy Bashara will go into greater detail on that a little bit later on in this presentation. So you'll notice that the arrows can sometimes go back. This is not to say that we're losing progress, but sometimes as we assess a problem statement, we might need to rework it. Sometimes when we discuss a proposed solution, that might inform the problem statement. So again, this is a very organic conversation that we're having here together. And so your engagement, both written comment, but also on this call, I can't stress this enough. I think it's incredibly important to be able to have that organic conversation. A thought that you might be having might spur some very good thoughts and conversation from another stakeholder. Is crucial to the success here. So we appreciate your time. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about the deliverables, right? What can we expect from this effort as far as a working group goes? So the demand and distributed energy market integration, again, please hit us with your thoughts for a nice catchy short name for this. We'll be doing the initial scoping discussion. This will be captured in a discussion paper, and the discussion paper will be going through multiple iterations and updated throughout different phases of the working group to reflect that stakeholder discussion. That will create a history, and it'll provide all of us with opportunities to reflect and comment and then prepare for the next phase, that subsequent discussion as we move forward towards what ultimately will be a final discussion paper and stakeholder recommendations. So not only do you have the opportunity to weigh in here on these calls, we will provide a written product. And then at that point, you have the ability to provide comment on that discussion paper during the meetings, as well as written comment via the commenting tool. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Ahmed. All right, I appreciate it. So I kind of covered these, so I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, right? This is a text version of the visual representation, but again, this is the kickoff call. I want to make sure we're all in line. We hope these are somewhat sequential, but again, we can go back. So when I say developing principles and the principles that we're about to propose to you here today, they're really meant to define and illustrate those fundamental principles for market design as it relates to this topic. So this would be DR and DER market integration. We want to form those problem statements. We want to make sure they're reflecting stakeholder concerns. There's several of you on this call who have already put forth this effort in last year's catalog process. We are picking those up. Those are starting from a place of already having had some discussion. So if anything, that can help us move expeditiously, right? But we also want to hear any new items in this arena of demand distributed energy market integration that you have for the working group to discuss. And we want to make sure that as a group, we're aligning on those priorities once we have these problem statements vetted out. We want to make sure that we're balancing both staff and stakeholder bandwidth. So which are going to be the top issues identified of most importance, right? And we're going to prioritize this together through this working group. We'll continue that vetting of problem statements. We'll explore both the current ISO market operations, like make sure we're starting from the same page and a good foundation, and then develop any methodology for any analysis or any data needs that you guys may have. That is definitely like an action item, right? If there's a certain set of data, we will do our best. We have to take a look at the feasibility of a quick turnaround, but please raise your hand, put that in your comments. Let us know what would be needed from a data perspective that would help inform this conversation, that would help you as a stakeholder in a stakeholder-led process kind of continue exploring some of these problem statements that we're talking about, and then ultimately determine those action items. And that's really where we start driving from the scoping and the working groups towards the continuation of the working groups into more of a proposal development phase once we have a crystallized problem statement that's been vetted and prioritized by the community. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And let's get a little bit more detail into those action items. I talked a little bit about, excuse me, data analysis that might be something that informs the future conversations. We have ISO staff as well who can provide just assessments, of feasibility assessments, operational assessments, technology assessments. I think these are things that our stakeholders have asked for, and we're going to partner with you in providing that. That informs our discussion on prioritization and how a problem statement should, rather issue identification should take place. And then there's also, want to be very clear here, any proposals for evaluation, given the topic that we're talking about, any proposals for evaluation or coordination of topics that are outside of ISO's jurisdiction, right? That could be an action item that comes out of these working groups. And just want to really stress that one of the things, because we do have some items that are somewhat already crystallized is the way that I've been characterizing it, right? That came from that prior effort in the roadmap process. Just an action item could be a commitment to a second phase of working groups to make sure that we address some of these lower priority topics or some of these concepts that we're discussing that might be vetted, but together we prioritize them a little bit different. These are all different versions of action items that we see. And they're really meant to help you, the stakeholders in this effort, articulate your vision of where you want this policy design to go. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide to just kind of visually transition here. I keep talking about the 2024 policy initiative roadmap, and there are several items, and we will, if we could put the, I believe we have it in the chat already, or Brenda, if you wouldn't mind putting Appendix B of the 2024 policy catalog in the chat for everybody. There were several items that were discussed and were directed to this working group as the venue to kind of continue that discussion. So again, we keep citing back to that, but we are also open to newer scope items here as well. And again, Jimmy Bouchard will get into greater detail on that. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, which is really a transition over to Ansel's section. But before we let him reference review any of the reference material that's available or that will be forthcoming, maybe this is a good time. If anybody has any questions on the process or anything that I just covered, please do feel free to raise your hand, and we're happy to take them now.
Thank you, Juan. At this time, I don't see any questions for those who joined us. We do have that raise hand located above the participant window. You'll be added to the queue, and please be sure to say your full name and affiliation so we know who's speaking.
I see no hands. Very good. Well, then in that case, let's dive in. Ansel, I will go ahead and give the floor to you.
Fantastic, Juan. Thanks so much for that overview of our process here and our outlook for the next several meetings as we kind of kick this working group off. I'm super excited to get moving on this. So thank you again to everybody for joining us today. I just wanted to take a quick moment to touch on kind of existing reference materials related to demand response and distributed energy market integration at the California ISO that is currently available to you as a stakeholder and to the public. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I want to make sure, as we kick this working group off, it's actually been a few years since we've had kind of a broader policy discussion about demand response and DER market participation at the California ISO specifically on this sort of set of issues. So I understand that we will have folks here on the call and throughout the working group who have a very deep knowledge of, maybe certain areas of this broad topic and maybe less so on others. So we want to make sure that folks are all on the same page throughout this working group process as we kind of discuss a suite of issues here. I think big picture, we're willing as kind of the host to save some time in future working group meetings for education on sort of key issues and topics, but we also want to prioritize this kind of live working group time with you all that we set aside on our calendars to, have more interactive discussions. So kind of looking for a balance. So we're looking for feedback though as well on kind of what the majority of folks would like us to kind of spend a little time updating on, but let me just run through this list of existing and potentially forthcoming resources we already have here. So the existing items, so that first link, the demand response participation, market participation comparison, is a matrix document that we put together recently. It's been updated as of last year, and it is an overview of kind of the various market participation options in the California ISO markets that's in the BAA as well as in the Western Energy Imbalance Market. Runs through kind of a comparison of each of the different models. So you'll be familiar with models such as proxy demand resource, RDRR, and kind of our forecast adjustment approach that is utilized across the Western Energy Imbalance Market. So I encourage you to take a look at that for kind of a quick overview with some in-depth material on comparing those different models. As always, we have on our website, CAISO.com, our suite of computer-based trainings, which are extremely helpful education resources across our energy market topics. And there is a specific training on demand response. So I would encourage you to take a look at that if you haven't already. I didn't list it here, but as always, we have our business practice manuals on our website. There's a demand response BPM, as well as a market operations and an energy imbalance BPM, which have many of the answers to questions that you may have. So, and again, these are all available to the public. Some of our resources are limited to market participants, but these are available to everyone. And then the forthcoming list is kind of items that we have shared, not necessarily on our website, but maybe as resources with as requested, and we plan to kind of prepare these for public working group consumption as we move through this working group. We're finding a question and answer document related to demand participation for frequently asked questions. There's a reference deck that we're finalizing on, similar to the matrix I spoke about above, for focused on Western EIM entity demand response participation. And then the last bullet is, like I said, based on kind of stakeholder needs and suggestions, we're considering sort of what we're calling an evergreen training, which is, we use that term in another CAISO working group, the Greenhouse Gas Accounting working group, and that is sort of a little bit different from our computer-based trainings, but a recorded presentation just with reference information and kind of helpful material, so we don't have to spend a live working group time on that, so folks can look at it asynchronously. So we hope kind of what we have and what we have coming is helpful to you all as market participants for kind of filling in areas you'd like to brush up on. And then we would be, like I said, seeking input on, ideas for what folks would like to hear discussed in working groups. And we can talk about how to use that time in the future. So that's all I have for these materials. I'd be happy to take any questions. Juan and Jimmy, does that sound good at this time on these materials, and then we can move on?
No, thanks, Ansel. I think that would be great. If you have any questions on anything that Ansel just went over as far as existing or any of the forthcoming, please do not hesitate to raise your hand.
And also the links provided also are in the chat window if you'd like to see those in real time. And then we also provide a BPM just for reference, and also the Evergreen Training YouTube series that also provides what Ansel just highlighted. Don't see any more questions.
Thank you, Brenda and Juan. All right. We can, like I said, kind of keep that topic open as far as what folks would like to hear a little bit more about, but I think maybe now we can move to the next slide. All right, I think I'll hand it to Jimmy.
All right, thanks so much, Juan, Ansel, and Brenda. Hopefully you can hear me all right. So for the scoping section, awesome, thanks. So as Juan alluded to for the scoping section, really looking forward to hearing from you all on the input and what your thoughts are as we get started and sort of hashing out really what are our core principles. Hopefully nothing shocking, just trying to go through market design principles and align on that so that we can sort of begin fleshing out, what are the problem statements? What are the issues that we're looking to solve here? The first DER effort we've had in a while, right? So some folks may be new to this, more of a stakeholder-led process. So, years past, we sort of start off with an issue paper, but here we're really looking to align on what are the issues to really be solved, what are the problems we're looking to address before you even get to that issue paper stage, right? So much more of a stakeholder-led focus. So before going into all that and looking forward to maybe your thoughts and ideas, we're going to start off with the principles. So I'll kindly sort of hand it back to Ansel to go through all that and take any questions you guys might have on that.
Excellent. Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, so let's go to the next slide, please. So establishing working group principles is something that we've done in other working groups at CAISO. And what we're doing here is bringing some draft principles that we've prepared and taking feedback from our participants today and in the comments on this meeting later on. We proposed some principles here. They reflect kind of standard principles of market design, and that should be something that we keep in mind once we finalize these principles throughout the working group process. We have heard great feedback from the Regional Issues Forum about kind of the working group process that we've worked on the past year or so. And so we've heard that we don't want to spend too much time workshopping these, but they're important for kind of a benchmark for how we evaluate these policy discussions that we're having here. So we did look at organizations in the market design and demand response space that we work with and kind of see what's out there for drawing from for these principles. And the parenthetical there kind of shows, not every topic that we discuss is going to align with every principle here, but they should instead serve as a way to illustrate trade-offs and to facilitate that assessment of priorities with the problem statements that we're going to discuss later in the working group. So I'll just kind of walk through these briefly and we can take quick initial feedback. But like I said, we'll be looking for reactions in the comments and trying to finalize these quickly so we can use them as a tool throughout the working group. So again, these are drawn from kind of best practices and reflect other principles from working groups at CAISO in the past. And the bottom line is, market design must align with the development of fair, stable, and competitive market structures. So that goes beyond demand response and distributed energy resource participation, but we've kind of made these specific to this topic. So number one, we have efficiency. The bullet is kind of an example of how this could look in the context of DER, indicating market co-optimization processes, utilization of DER that produces least cost market results while meeting our reliability needs. So efficiency of kind of our processes and how market results produce what we're looking for in our markets. Number two, we have competition. This is kind of a long-standing principle at the ISO that we want to support competition that in a way that benefits consumers, and to allow the flexible demand and smaller resources to participate in a similar manner as large-scale conventional generators. This is kind of a long-standing principle that we've heard from FERC on DR market participation. Next slide, please. All right, number 3, we have feasibility. I think this one has been critical in other working groups. You know, we're looking for kind of looking at problem statements and potential solutions that are feasible for the ISO to implement, and, you know, that are kind of worth what it would require to implement potential solutions to solve the problems that we're talking about, if that makes sense. So, you know, could we do it? Maybe. Is it worth it? Let's talk about that. Number 4, we have simplicity, kind of a similar thing. We always strive for this in our market design efforts at CAISO, just to make things not too complicated in a way that keeps things transparent and makes our market results and processes understandable and clear. Number 5, we have reliability and compliance. You know, we want these standards to be reflected in our market designs. This one is self-explanatory. One of our key priorities at the ISO, of course, is reliability. So this one seemed to make sense as a principle for us. And finally, we have jurisdictional roles and responsibilities. You know, it's our longstanding practice to have our market designs facilitate state public policy goals to the extent practicable, and not undermine those goals and preferences. So as we talk about these efforts in the context of, like I said, California, but also our broader Western market participants, this is something to keep in mind. So these are the principles that we have put up with, put forth and kind of drafted for you today. Would love, again, to get feedback on these. If the team would like to add anything, please do so at this time, and then we can take kind of any initial questions or reactions and look forward to your comments on these kind of proposed principles.
Thanks, Ansel. No further comments from me. So to the stakeholder community here, again, these are going to be the principles that we're looking at. Any potential problem statements or proposals, right? We'll be using these as the lens that we're viewing these problem statements and proposals through. So would really value just initial thoughts. And even if that's a confirmation of agreement, right? I think it's important for us to discuss this together.
Thanks, Juan.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. Ansel, any questions in the queue, Brenda or Ahmed?
No questions in queue.
All right. Well, this being the kickoff meeting, you know, we don't expect any baked input, right? But we try to post material in advance to get you guys thinking. And of course, we'll be circulating a comments template to further get sort of hopefully more baked input. So maybe with that, everyone's sort of clamoring to get into the meat of really the conversation of your ideas. So, you know, I think Ansel nicely went over the principles for what we're looking for here. You know, hopefully nothing too shocking is mentioned, but we're looking forward to your feedback on that. But maybe if we want to go to the next slide. All right, great. So as already mentioned, you know, this working group is really happening because of your input into our yearly roadmap / catalog efforts. For those unfamiliar with that process, that's our yearly process that sort of identifies, you know, which initiatives ISO will undertake for the following year. So we got a lot of these nice, you know, requests here in the DER space, which led to the creation of this initiative. So as mentioned, I think Juan nicely discussed in the beginning how these items have been referred to this working group as part of our initial scoping discussion, which will of course define what ultimately goes into any future policy development efforts, which we're looking forward to with you all. So in other words, right, if you didn't participate in our yearly catalog process, we now have this initiative where we can all discuss this fun stuff, and you can still bring your problem statements, proposals, et cetera, through this forum. Because now that we have this started up, any sort of future related requests to DR and DER that would be brought up in the future, this year's catalog or anything moving forward would just be funneled back to this working group. So really looking forward to diving into all these issues with you all. So with that, you can see we have all these nice requests, real-time load bidding from CDWR. We got a request for the RDRR minimum on time and fixed cost dispatch from CLECA. Next, as you can see, we've got a request to address modified PDR, a hybrid PDR with behind the meter storage from the joint demand response parties. PG&E had submitted a request for a revision of DR control group settlement methodology. Some more on the settlements and baseline side on that. Another PDR enhancement, program enhancement request from PAC, Portland, and Nevada. So we look forward to hearing more details on that. SCE have submitted a couple of requests, one on evaluating and addressing the market rule inconsistency among the 5, 15, and 60-minute bidding options for demand response. Their second request was to remove the RDRR, or reliability demand response, discrete dispatch limit of 100 megawatts. NCPA submitted a request for hydrogen electrolyzer market participation. It's interesting right there. And then SMUD has kindly submitted a request for DERs for external BAs. So we again appreciate all of your participation, these requests, and everyone that had participated in our catalog process last year, and looking forward to really getting into these for this series. So maybe we can go on to the next slide, and then we can start taking questions and input, all that fun stuff. So as mentioned, right, keeping those core principles in mind that Ansel nicely went over, what issues should be discussed in this working group. So I just went over the requests we got in the catalog. Either those requests that have been submitted by stakeholders, now's the chance, right, to sort of feel free to elaborate on what these requests are really trying to solve and what the issue is, right? What's the core problem? And I think we're sort of hammering this point home. We want to know what we can prioritize for the problem statement so that we can best know what the solution is ultimately in the policy development space as we get onto that timeline. There might be some low-hanging fruits we can identify, where we can always have the chance to off-ramp items, right, as we further discuss it and flesh out those ideas. Just want to note, as already mentioned, anything being addressed in any current initiative working groups will not be considered in the roadmap. Those have already been funneled, right? And this is the forum for all things demand response and DER related. So with that, I'll pause there. Any questions over what I mentioned? And more importantly, if we want to go to the next slide and kick off any discussion and thoughts, comments, questions, ideas.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy. We do have a question in the chat here, which I'm going to look to Ansel for here. So Peter just representing himself, and Peter, I appreciate you doing your affiliation via the chat as well. That's most appreciated. Thank you for that. So Ansel, does the reference to CAISO markets in the context of what we've been discussing here include both energy and capacity markets?
Yeah, so good question, Peter. So kind of asking about the, are we just talking about energy market design, or are we also talking about RA program impacts at the CAISO? I would just kind of a first crack at that. I would say, well, first of all, you may know me also from our RA working group at CAISO, which is happening right now, and we're getting into the straw proposal phase. So My sense is that we'll keep kind of holistic our resource adequacy and capacity questions and policy items to that working group. However, there will be inevitable overlap and RA impacts from what we're discussing. If you're familiar with the 2024 catalog items, you'll recognize that some of those have kind of a resource adequacy implication. So it will come up. I guess I would also clarify, we do not operate a capacity market per se, but we do have a resource adequacy program that incorporates demand response and resources. So thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Ansel. This is Jill, and the only addition to answering Peter's question, and you touched upon it about the fact that the ISO does not have a capacity market. And what we're speaking to here are really the participation models, for market integration, for these type of resources, if they were to be part of a resource adequacy resource fleet, can meet their must offer obligation in terms of the requirement for participation in the wholesale markets. So we are somewhat, as Ansel said, there is a tie into resource adequacy, and I'm sure we'll touch on some subject matter that intersects with RA, but it's really the focus here is on the models that enable participation in resource adequacy and meeting a resources must offer obligation. That's it.
Thanks, Jill.
All right, apologies.
For the question, Peter.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say I can't see the chat if there's any more chat questions, so thanks for that. Any other questions, thoughts?
We do have one raised hand.
We do have Tony. Let's go ahead and unmute him.
Great, thank you very much. This is Tony Zimmer on behalf of Northern California Power Agency. Just one quick question. Thanks, for this discussion and getting the group organized to figure out how to move this forward in an efficient manner. And with the list of items shown on, I think, slide or page 22 of the presentation, one of those items is an item, obviously of selfish interest in CPA because we propose it into the stakeholder initiative process. But looking at the list, there's quite a bit of meat on that list, and there could be a lot of detail related to those subjects. So just for maybe my own education, in terms of once we get into a more kind of detailed discussion of all these various items, do you envision kind of going through some process to kind of prioritize how we determine which items we may focus on, or is there going to be, some type of way that, we could provide more input or feedback on the context of our item? I'm just curious how you guys were thinking about kind of going through this list and touching on them. And I'm just really joking more than anything else. But the reason I asked is mine's the second to bottom on the list. So I was just trying to figure out, do I need to get it to the top or what do I need? So if you could just talk about how you might plan on going through this and prioritizing, that would be super helpful.
Tony, good to hear from you. Good to hear from you. Absolutely, in no particular order, right? When we put this list together, and there will absolutely be, I think, prior to that stakeholder prioritization conversation, we talk about just general allocation of ours, but also that there will be an opportunity for, the further exploration and for you to, I said, generally speaking, there will be opportunities to present. You raised your hand here, so I'll say, yeah, absolutely, for this item in specific as well. That way there is that further fleshing out. I'll say this, internally, we've been calling this session 0, right? It's kind of the kickoff call. And if you go to the initiative page, you'll see we've telegraphed out at least the last 3 tentative dates. Our goal is to continue that practice. We'll have a comments template here, and I would also encourage anyone else who either would like to kind of add some color on an item they see on the screen, or in particular, maybe add an additional item, right? And that's going to be part of that comments template. When we have that full list, we'll then devote the time to ensure that there's a shared understanding across the stakeholder community, inclusive of you having an opportunity to present and kind of speak to it a little bit more. A good understanding of, from ISO subject matter experts on, different policy or implementation or regulatory risk. And with that information in hand, Tony, I think that's when we would go to a prioritization effort. So I see that you lowered your hand. Hopefully that, again, if you raise your hand, if you lower it, you'll be remuted. Happy to, hopefully that answered your question. If not, please do feel free to jump back in queue there.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, and I appreciate that. We look forward to actively engaging in the process. So thanks for that clarification.
We appreciate that, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. I will just add, right, Tony, as you may know from participating in other working groups or anyone else that may have already been participating in our recent working groups, really focusing on what is the issue or problem trying to solve and not trying to jump ahead to the solution. So the better you can sort of extrapolate, why is this request there? What's the issue it's trying to resolve? So that we can sort of align on how big is this problem? Is this something feasible that we can tackle and just make those, pros and cons and weigh that out a little bit better, have a much more measured idea of what the ultimate scoping is going to be. And here, as Juan mentioned, this is in no way indicating any priority the way we have it displayed on the screen. So.
No, that's really helpful feedback. And we'll try to ensure that, pending opportunity, and we'll be engaged in the process to kind of present some more information about that topic. We'll kind of focused on that, that subject. So I appreciate that feedback. That's helpful.
Next, we do have Lowell. Let's go take his hand.
This is Lowell Watrous. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes.
Yes. I'm with Gridsby Consulting Firm. And I don't know if this is the right forum, but I did get a question from a potential client about getting a break on their costs being a new interruptible load, and they would be able to, they were wondering if they could dispatch into the CAISO market. They would be a high capacity factor on an annual basis, but they could interrupt their operations during, peak cost times. And they were looking to see if there was a venue for their particular new load. And I just wondered if that fit in any of the discussions today. And if not, just maybe direct me where it might.
Yeah, so this would be the forum to have those discussions, but we can also, if you want to follow up offline, and we can get your contact information to see really what you're looking to do, to see if we may have an existing model right in place. But yeah, thanks for your comment. I think that's exactly what we're looking to discuss.
Great, thanks, James.
Rick. I love seeing these hands go up, guys. Thank you. Again, in the future, I will be calling on, if you raise your hand, I'm going to call, like Tony, I'm going to call on you in the future. So Rick, go ahead.
There we go. I was muted. Rick, I'm from BENGC. Worked in some of the other capacity markets and the RTOs over in PJM, New York, and New England. Are you guys going to be doing something similar with the real-time markets, EDART, and reserve as well, the different types with the demand response and things like that? Or is it going to be completely different, or is it going to be sort of what the other guys are doing kind of model? So in that sense, especially for ancillary markets and reserve and all the other stuff. I know you guys don't have an RPM capacity market, so the other ones. General question.
Oh, thanks for the question. No, I appreciate it. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks. No, I was just gonna, I'll let others add. I'll just take a stab. Like, you know, we're really not limiting ideas or suggestions, right, to what we traditionally have limited in the CAISO market. We're looking at more holistically, what does demand participation look like? And given our, you know, EDAM and other expansion efforts, you know, we are curious to hear any more ideas of maybe what demand participation could look like apart from our traditional DR models, right? I don't know if that really answers your
Sorry,
question.
James, James. I was going to add something to what you were saying. And
Yeah.
also kind of keep in mind to the FERC 22 and the 981 and 901, kind of all those things and the working groups that are happening at the NERC to kind of get those frameworks that are happening actively right now. I think it would be definitely beneficial to the team or everybody here, especially with the ancillary markets and the need for capacity everywhere with all these new things that are happening everywhere with the loads, both on EVs and everything. You know, I'm not going to go into that, but I think it definitely needs to align with all the new FERC orders that are coming in regards to ancillary markets and day ahead, real time, you know. Have you guys looked at the net cone as well and the LMP and all that, those factors that come into play into the market as well as we're discussing? I think we should probably pin it somewhere in the market, how we're going to structure these things and make sure that we learn from others' mistakes and don't repeat what they're trying to fix now.
Yeah. Again, anyone from CAISO, feel free to jump in, but at least, you know, being familiar with FERC 2222, you know, the CAISO aggregation model for DERs was before that order, actually. We largely had complied with it. And I think, you know, after the order came out, we made a couple of compliance filings so that we can make sure to meet all of those requirements. We're still looking for participants, not model, right? But we can always discuss what we think is lacking in this forum, if it requires a policy change. And not as familiar with orders, I think you said 981 and 901. But
those
yeah,
are a working group right now, so there's like a lot of things happening at the NERC, but I think it would behoove to have people in those rooms at the NERC to get in what's coming down because they're developing those. And
yeah,
I was just
so we're
earlier today and yesterday on that.
Okay. Yeah, so emerging issues, right? We're definitely looking forward to see how we can better align to the extent we feel we need any further changes in our tariff to meet the orders, right? I think you're on the right idea there. Yeah. So anyone from CAISO, though, feel free to add to that.
Feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my contact and then we'll work.
Great. Looking forward to it. All right. So we have a few other hands.
Go ahead, Rick. Your line will be unmuted. Oh, sorry, not Rick. Colin Smith. Sorry about that.
Hi, my name is Colin Smith. I'm with Leap, a demand response aggregator based in California. And I left a message in the chat about this before I figured out how to raise my hand. But just going back to some of the principles that were discussed, I think in the slide before this, you know, when I look at the list in front of us and thinking back to those principles, I think it would be valuable to have maybe an explicit principle focused on something like, you know, considering how to increase the amount of capacity that's available to CAISO from DERs. You know, these resources start being integrated into the market at scale, and considering that CAISO is, you know, capacity shortages are still a concern. I think it's just important to keep in mind that many of these policy recommendations would have the end effect of making more resources available to CAISO in one form or another, and that in itself is valuable. And so maybe that would fit into, you know, jurisdictional questions with, you know, state policies increase capacity or DER integration. Maybe it goes into competition and the ability to compete fairly against other types of generators. But I just want to make sure we don't lose in the discussions the fact that, you know, one of the end goals of a number of these policy changes is to allow more of these resources to participate and provide capacity to the grid when it's needed.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great input. You know, when I hear capacity, it maybe sounds more on the side of a future sort of enhancement request or proposal that should be aligned with the principles. But yeah, it looks like maybe roles and responsibilities, competition could fit in those too. So definitely open to hearing more on those and what we might need to consider, for example, from NERC, right, for our principles, things like that. Appreciate it.
Next, we do have John Kitchen. Please make sure to introduce yourself.
Maybe double muted, John.
You guys hear me now?
We can.
Oh, that was weird. I had to click it a couple times. Yeah, so John Kitchen, Portland General Electric, thanks for having me. Thanks for putting this together. I see there's a huge audience here, so looks like you guys had pretty good success getting people here. So yeah, so Portland General Electric has been, you know, advocates for these sorts of changes. You know, again, just to recap, I know we've talked with CAISO, SMUD, and some others, but you know, some of the issues that we were having is the existing processes allow us to get credit. And again, you know, for some of the folks on here, because I think it sounds like there's a mixture of folks that are under CAISO's BA as well as possibly EIM entities. You know, so PGE is a WEIM participant. So for us, it's different, right? And so we have mechanisms in place to represent our resources, but it's a very manual process. And so we're looking to change that. We don't really have an easy way to automate the process or make all of our DRs participating resources, right, without facing a lot of challenges. And so that's kind of what we were hoping for, knowing that we might not necessarily be able to get 100% of everything, but you know, we could look at and work through that. That's, I think, what PGE was hoping to get out of this. But also something for CAISO that I was just thinking of is we look through this, looking through this and seeing how many people and just the different topics is how that's going to impact the different types of entities. Because we've got, you know, we've got the WEIM entities, and then we've got the CAISO LSEs and the CAISOs, the people that are under CAISO's BA. And I don't know how it's going to impact WEIM entities different, or if those processes are different. So I don't know if you guys were thinking about that, and maybe there might be some work groups where both the WEIM entities and CAISO LSEs need to work together on topics, but there may be things that are actually separate and need to be worked on separately because they're completely different. So just a thought there.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Good
one, yeah.
Jimmy, if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of take first crack at this one, and then to the whole CAISO team, please do feel free to weigh in. John, you're absolutely right that this is a broad effort, right? And it is a vast, varied collection, right, of representation on this call. I think that our process is one that we're looking to tackle the market design elements of this. And if we're talking about the potential of taking a look at a process improvement, I think that can be discussed here. I think if we're taking a look at the potential of, you know, modifying existing PDR models, that's exactly what we're here to discuss here. So I think you hit the nail on the head with the former, in that, you know, this might be an opportunity for people that are both within the ISOBA and in the WIM to kind of come together. And I think that in particular with your submission into the roadmap, you're one of those items that kind of already is pretty close to a problem statement. So I think having a formalized problem statement from the EIM community, which is part of the stakeholder group on this call, getting towards that formal problem statement, it's going to be involved into this general prioritization and proposed solutions, and together we might be able to kind of move forward to address that issue if the whole community comes together and it kind of centralizes around the spirit of the problem statement, right? I mentioned the spirit of the principles earlier. I think there is some synergies across, regardless of whether you're like what entity, and we're really looking to try to find kind of a coalescing of a problem statement that really tackles the spirit of it. So hopefully that gave a little bit of hopefully that answered your question. Feel free to ask a clarifier if I didn't, or to the CAISO team, feel free to weigh in as well.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Juan.
Next, we do have Nadia War. You will be unmuted. Nadia, you might be double muted. Just, we're not hearing you yet. Go ahead and click unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I just want to provide a little bit of the PacifiCorp perspective for our submission. So essentially, we have in the past tried to get our irrigation programs registered and found that it was very difficult as the available baseline methodologies didn't align with it. And so it was our understanding that the current CAISO proxy demand response were primarily designed for California market participants, and that there might be a need to revamp that process, which is what we submitted during the annual policy roadmap for our submission. We were also told that this process is currently in the tariff area for CAISO, and that there could be a viable pathway to change it to the BPM, so that essentially that would provide more flexibility to add more baseline methodologies to be evaluated and considered. And so that's essentially where we're coming to the table here today. And then apart from that, we do have a demand response program that was successfully registered. And essentially the mechanism for us to be able to communicate when we did want to enact that program is through email. So we also wanted to have CAISO evaluate if there was a way to streamline that process more.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Nadia. I may turn to Jill or Ansel because I'm not as familiar with the FERC landscape and how it relates to baselines, but I know that we definitely want to have market integrated sort of baselines that align with FERC, right? And if it's outside of California or any other methodology, we're definitely open to that feedback. But Jill or Ansel, someone or anyone else from CAISO, please feel free to add to that.
I can comment on that. Yes, thank you for the comment. And yes, this is the right place for discussions on baseline. I did want to somewhat correct. The PDR model is a model that was developed based on a FERC order. It was not modeled off of any California specific policy. It is an economic model, and it was developed to comply with a FERC order for open, competitive, for demand response, open access to the markets. However, the baselines, we also throughout the years have gone through multiple different iterations of looking at variety of different baselines. We did start off with kind of principles and guides that were established through NAESB, a national organization. We're open within this working group to consider others. And I think there is a desire, you saw on the list, not only from PacifiCorp, but other entities that would like us to expand on what might be available for performance measurement of demand response, and definitely open to that within this working group. We would like to hear what might be being utilized for measurement of performance in other type of programs, other state programs, your programs, utility programs, and work toward providing that flexibility within our potentially tariffs or within our business practice manuals to look at, other ways, other means of performance measurement than those we have currently in our tariff.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Jill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia.
Next, we do have Jennifer.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jennifer Bach. I'm with the California Community Choice Association, CalCCA, representing the 24 CCA members that we have throughout California. And I want to just provide the perspective of the CCAs, some of whom were on this call, who are mainly interested in getting RA credit for behind-the-meter distributed energy resources. And a lot of them have been launching a number of DER programs, and several of them are looking at DERMS platforms for participating in the wholesale market. And we're going to be submitting some proposals along that lines, and consistent with some of the remarks or comments that we made in the PUC's Future Grid Study Report. This really involves visibility of the ISO at the transmission distribution level, as well as distribution marketplaces and the potential for a distribution marketplace to aggregate a lot of these behind-the-meter resources for participation in the ISO market, and doing so at a cost-effective means and reducing some of the barriers to entry. So I don't know if this means some participation under existing market models or possibly a new market model, but we'd like to explore those opportunities throughout this process, and we'll be putting these in our comments.
Great, yeah, thank you so much for that, Jennifer. Definitely looking forward to hearing more on that. We've had a lot of conversations with our aggregation model and how it relates to DERMS, right? And so to the extent we can identify any policy gaps, we'd love to see how we can do that with you all.
Fantastic, thank you.
Great, I see we have a number of other hands. This is great, thanks folks.
Next we do have Kate. Please be sure to introduce yourself and click the unmute button when sent.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. It's Kate Unger with the California Solar and Storage Association, a trade association that represents companies that do behind the meter for the most part, and I focus on virtual power plants. So I like this as a sort of a nice dovetail with Jennifer's comments. Just for quick context before my question. We have found behind the meter batteries have a sort of unique set of obstacles to market participation, including trying to fit into existing demand response models, which is an imperfect fit. And we are interested in the modified PDR proposal, and we may also want to bring other issues into the group. So my question is, in identifying possible new topics for the working group to work on, what level of development would you like to see? I think I heard you say that you want to focus foremost on issue and problem statements before solutions. So it seems like you're not looking for fully formed proposals. I just want to hear a little more from you about what you envision if stakeholders bring in new ideas for topics to work on.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kate. Well, we don't want to get bogged down in semantics, right? So if you feel that presenting the whole package along with the solution can paint the better picture as to what the problem is you're trying to address or the issue that's trying to be resolved, I think that's what we're going after. We're focusing on issues and problem statements a lot. You'll hear us say that, but really we all want to just get an idea of what is the actual impact to doing, the potential solution, what is it really trying to solve? Because that way we can better align up front rather than jumping ahead. But if you think that painting the solution as far as the overall context will help with that, then by all means we look forward to that. But we don't want to get bogged down and only focus on this or that. You know, if it helps give folks an idea and inform us as to what the business case and core problem is, right? That's what we're sort of looking for, at least for this early on first couple of meetings before we get into the solution space.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think it's nice to know that there's an opening to bring in a problem if we don't have the solution. But the
Exactly.
openness to hear potential solutions as well. Thank you so much.
Likewise, yeah, thank you. And just a reminder, as we're moving on to other questions, it's always good to be mindful of, you know, sort of jurisdictional boundaries, things like that, as we're forming these ideas. You know, as we mentioned, there could be things out there that the CPC might be better suited to address. I know there's a lot of intersections with RA, for example, so just want to be cognizant of that. All right, appreciate those who put your hands down. I thought we had a lot more to go, but I don't see any other questions unless I'm missing anything, Brenda or others.
We did get some few questions in the queue in the chat window. Just want to confirm few affiliations that were not provided, but we can cover those if the team's ready.
Sure.
Awesome. So the first one's from Ben Peters. He's from CEC. In studying distribution system interconnected front of meter solar plus storage projects as load modifiers, as part of the IEPR process, would you like to highlight if there are any related policy topics that should be considered? And additionally, and then he provided email contact as well.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, Ben, for the question. Maybe if you're able to elaborate or hop on the phone, otherwise we're looking forward, you know, we're getting a comments template circulating. But I think your question was if we would like to highlight if there are any related policy topics which should be considered. Again, we're trying not to really jump to what topics should be considered without first looking at what really the issue is that you're trying to solve. So I think it looks like you're interested in load modifiers and how that relates with the CAISO for a CEC project. So we're looking forward to hearing more detail on that if you're able to extrapolate either now or in comments.
Yeah, I think too, Jimmy, that it may be, if this is an area that needs more clarification as to how the ISO sees load modifiers in terms within our planning and within our market. You know, there are things that would not be in scope in terms of this specific item that you bring up, which about load modification, load modifiers. It's something the ISO recognizes, but it's not so much something that we would be within scope of this particular working group, because again, this is a market integration. Load modifiers are not market integrated, but there might be some educational, you know, questions or something that we could do to help provide a little bit of clarity as to how they fit into the full picture of recognition through, you know, ISO recognition and how they're viewed within the market. But in terms of a scope, that specific item would not be in scope for this particular working group as written.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks again, Ben, for the question. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I heard somebody. Or not. All right. Anything else, Brenda, in the chat?
No more chat questions.
Okay. Great. We got not a lot of nice early input, I think. I don't see
I
any
see
other
one
hands.
from
Oh, looks like there's
Colin.
another one.
Sorry,
Sorry,
yeah,
go
I see
ahead,
one
Colin.
from Colin in the chat. I see one from Colin in the chat here. Colin, oh, I see your hand raised now, Colin. I see your hand down. Colin from LEAP asked, what is the process for submitting additional DR and DR issues for consideration in this working group? Right, we talked about how we have kind of a heavy influx of items from the catalog, but we're open to new ones. So Colin, it would be, you can share them openly on this call if you want to discuss them and kind of allow that stakeholder discussion to happen. But as Jimmy mentioned, we are also going to put out a comments template. We're not expecting a comments template for every single working group session. We're not expecting you guys to have to turn around official written comments for every working group session. But I think in particular here, please do. We will have a question in which you will be able to provide additional issues for consideration here. That then informs this working group of the totality, both items that have come into the roadmap as well as new items to consider within the discussion.
Thanks, Juan. Looking forward to your input for sure. Well, that is the final sort of slide we have before moving on to next steps, and I'll kindly turn it over to Brenda here shortly, unless we have any final comments, thoughts, before it looks like we get in a little bit early and get that template out, and looking forward to your feedback. All right, Brenda. Oh, looks like Colin, your hand went up again, unless it's just my phone.
No,
Yeah, no, it did.
Colin,
I
you're
decided
playing
to
with
take
okay.
Juan up on his offer to throw out new items here, and I'll put this in the comments too, so that it's more fleshed out. But I think there might be an opportunity to look into the data that is accepted to evaluate demand response performance. There are a couple of options. Mostly it's utility meter data, I think, is what is required. I know there are some couple options to do kind of accept sub-meter data or device level data that are in the tariff. Those aren't heavily used right now, and I think there are some changes that could be made to make those something that is able to fix some of the challenges we're seeing with sort of data access and the use of data for performance measurement for demand response in California. So I'll flesh that out more in comments rather than here, but I wanted to throw that out there in case anyone wanted to have a discussion or just to give a primer.
Absolutely appreciate that, Colin. This informs both, the working group. If you have any reactions, Jennifer, I saw your hand shoot up. Please go ahead. This is exactly the type of interactive discussion we want. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Mike, I had a separate question on just logistics.
Okay. Well, then, Jennifer, give me one moment then. So Colin, yes, please do flesh it out. And then we will, again, there will always be an opportunity later to kind of continue that discussion for the items that we get in. We are kind of collecting this, let's call it a menu of issue identification items for us to consider. So Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask about the comments. You said there won't be comments after every session. For CalCCA, since we're a membership organization, we have to vet all of our comments through our members, which takes some time to do. So I just wanted to make sure on the meeting cadence that we would have an opportunity, sufficient time to gather input from our members before responding.
100%, Jennifer. That feedback resonates deeply with me. Yes. Not only will you have sufficient time to provide those comments, that's one of the reasons we don't want comments after every session, right? We'll signal, we'll do our best to signal well in advance, after this session, let's take stock and have another, comments template will be posted. We'll be able to kind of reflect on the evolution of the conversation, and we will make sure that you have sufficient time. There are many, I think, on this call who are representative and would need that time to go back to the members and come back. So your feedback is heard, and rest assured that you'll have sufficient time.
Thanks, Juan.
Not a problem.
Thanks, Jennifer and Juan. Yeah, I see we have another chat. Thanks, Brenda. From Michael to all panelists. Will this working group be able to tackle the inherent conflict between the behavior incentives created by utility rate structures and the behavior incentives created by DR type programs? So, you know, incentives and utility rate structures, that's not within the CAISO processes, right? So to the extent you can identify how that could impact participation and whether there would need to be a sort of CAISO role in that and how the CAISO role would play into that, we're all ears. But good question. So anyone else, feel free to add, of course. And as a reminder, right, you know, oh, go ahead. I heard somebody.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, Jimmy. Michael, thank you for that question. And, you know, I think we appreciate that. We'll definitely, please do kind of flesh that out further in the comments. You know, within that comments template, I think we also have our feedback requested on our principles, and I think we get quite a bit of those principles. I think I feel pretty good about jurisdictional roles being one of those principles so far, and we're open to feedback because I think it's come up a couple of times here. You know, just in essence, want to make sure that we're understanding the CAISOs, you know, the ISOs, independent system operators. So we're looking through those principles as a lens for what the CAISO can do to change market design within its own kind of tariff authority. So please do flesh that out further in the comments template, and we appreciate your engagement here.
Go ahead, Michael. I think he raised his hand.
Hi, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Yeah, just maybe I'll elaborate just so I'm clear, like how to provide comments that are useful. So an example of, you know, sort of conflicting incentives is if you have a tariff, you write with, for example, high demand charges with time of use periods, and you have customers who are trying to actively manage their loads every single day to reshape their load curve to minimize demand charges, right? That is in direct conflict with a DR program that's using a baseline methodology. And there are other examples, but there is, when you have specific events that happen, they have, like, I think if CAISO is not taking into consideration what customers are doing behavior-wise anyways every single day because of the price they're paying on a normal utility retail tariff, that has a direct impact on the effectiveness of whatever programs, policies, or structures you come up with.
Thanks for raising your hand and kind of adding those clarifications here. I think, you know, that's precisely the two-way street that is a working group, right? So we please, when you put those comments in, please do kind of paint that picture out on those conflicts, and help us understand what it is specifically that the ISO can change to address there. If that means citing retail tariff or CAISO tariff in conflict, you know, please reflect those in your comments. We appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. I see another hand from Jennifer. I'm not sure if it's the same one or if you have a new question, Jennifer.
No, sorry, forgot to.
All good, yeah. So yeah, thanks, Juan. So good reminder to, you know, that's why we're sort of hashing out these principles as a starter, just to know our the bounds by which we're going to be diving into the discussion, right? So definitely that hits on the jurisdictional role, and we are limited with how we can change our tariff, but to the extent we can be cognizant of the incentive conflicts, things like that, make it easier for participation. That's why we're here. Go ahead, Kate. I see other hands, or Brenda. I don't know if it's others besides Kate that was first. Sorry.
Well, I'll just go ahead and jump in. Just adding on this thought of the jurisdictional roles and the principles. I appreciate what you're saying about wanting to focus on things that the CAISO can actually address, but I do think it's important for the working group process to recognize that there are some issues where there's entangled jurisdictional issues. And, you know, I'll go back to behind the meter batteries for resource adequacy. We have had this difficulty of there are some issues that are in the CAISO's hands, there are some that are in the CPUC's hands. For purposes of the working group, if there are people here from the CPUC and from the CEC and the CAISO, this is a great time to be having conversations about those kinds of issues. I would hate to see them deprioritized simply because the CAISO cannot independently address them, and then they are not considered in this working group, which is a great opportunity otherwise to discuss them.
I appreciate that feedback, Kate. And Jill, I hope I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know when we were drafting jurisdictional roles and kind of the sub bullet there, right, of market design should facilitate state public policies to the extent practical, and what we noted as action items. If you wouldn't mind at least, just kind of fleshing out what we meant by a potential action item, being the ability to perhaps take something that is coordination of a topic outside of our jurisdiction, but it still does not mean that, Kate, to your point, that interwoven nature cannot be reflected in this discussion. And I think to Michael's clarifier, which was appreciated, we do want to learn from you what you see as those interdependencies or that interwoven nature of it. So Jill, I'll toss it to you if you want to add anything there.
Not too much adding to that. It's not that we would not have that discussion within this working group. We definitely know that there's some areas that the ISO can make changes to our participation models to facilitate this, desired means for participation in representation of these DERs within the markets. There will be within those discussions some of the areas that go beyond our jurisdiction, but that we could bring up within this working group and anticipate that we will have participation from entities that may be in their jurisdiction or maybe have their visibility to identify these as areas that they could take action on as well in different areas, different proceedings or different areas. We will not consider items of interest and problem statements that may cross those jurisdictional boundaries. We will definitely allow for them to be discussed and to be worked out within this working group.
Yeah, very, very well said. Thanks for the question again. All right, 2 hands went down, so I was wondering if they were up. Thanks again, Kate and Michael, for those. Great, this is exactly what we were looking for. To Jennifer's point, the next steps we'll hit on the cadence and meeting dates, things like that, so you guys are aware. But any last comments before I turn over to Brenda for that?
I see one kind of logistical question here in the chat of when will the comment template be posted. This team is actually going to be meeting. This working group team is going to be meeting immediately following this session. We're aiming to post that comment template today, and one of the reasons is that, again, we're looking for this organic conversation. We don't want to presume the conversation that happens in these working group sessions. So you'll likely see the comment templates when they are posted following a session. we want to ensure that they're reflective of the topics that were discussed and that we can get that valuable feedback from you guys. So it'll be posted later today, and just a little bit of context as how we're kind of approaching those moving forward.
All right, great segue to take it away, Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan, Jimmy, Jill, and Ansel. At the next slide, 25, we are going to be doing our next steps. And right now what we're presenting is that we wanted to invite stakeholder presentations. If they're interested to submit a problem statement, send it over to the ISO Stakeholder Affairs at CAISO.com with the subject line request to present for the Demand and Distributed Energy Market Integration Working Group. We do encourage you to add on like that problem statement. We also are asking for that presentation to be provided as a PowerPoint, but we can go into detail for each interested presenter on the exact requirements for the upcoming meeting. The next one is that the futures meetings will provide that as a timeline tentatively scheduled. So we know we have one coming up in March 4th, so we'll kind of go over that one next. And then we do plan to finalize principles based on the feedback of the comments that we receive. So that will be discussed within that next meeting. Next slide, please. So as we've mentioned that we have working group sessions coming pretty soon, rapidly. We have 2 in March 4th and 19th tentatively scheduled for the afternoons, followed by April sessions, one on the 7th and 29th. We will make sure to provide a notice when that meeting is confirmed for the stakeholder community to make sure you could have that time set. But if any stakeholder sees a potential conflict that may require you to be at the meeting, let us know. We are definitely want to work with our stakeholder community as well as every organization that's really heavily involved in this meeting to be participating on the real live meeting. So we'll make sure on that. And then also as comments will be given, comment template will be posted later today, hopefully, and then we'll have that comment template available through the end of day of February 21st. But if you do anticipate any questions on that submittal date, please reach out to us at ISO Stakeholder Affairs at CAISO.com, and also we will have a potential way to submit comments as well. And then next slide, please. So we also provided many materials providing that Demand and Distributed Energy Market Integration Working Group webpage as well. During that links that we put in the chat will not be available outside of this recording. So if you are able to grab them now, that'll be great. But as mentioned, we did have a few links with referencing the Evergreen training is just a reference of the existing process, the Ansel went over, and also the BPMs. They're very important. We definitely use the BPMs as market operations and demand response for our upcoming content. And also just a clarification on a comment that I mentioned earlier from Ben Peters. He is from the WEC. Just want to confirm everyone when they speak, make sure you provide affiliation. But thanks so much for those who were able to provide it and provide those comments. And we were able to capture those notes and hopefully provide a clear summary at the next meeting. As well, if you have any questions, feel free to send them over to myself or ISO Stakeholder Affairs at CAISO.com. And then last slide. Energy Blog Matters is a way that we communicate with industry-related news. The latest is that we updated a new social media platform, Blue Sky. This will not be replacing any existing communication form that we provide to our stakeholder community. So we will be using that as another tool to kind of outreach on anything that we post via X, which is Twitter, and also our notice list. But definitely encourage everyone to sign up and subscribe for the daily briefing. That provides more of a real-time afternoon update of every day, whether there's a meeting coming up and so forth. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And at this time, I don't see any questions from the team. We appreciate the great participation from all the folks here today. This call recording will estimated be available about Friday, but we hope to provide that recording soon on our YouTube channel if you search up California ISO. So we'll have that recording and that'll be made available also on the initial webpage. So you can also see it there. But YouTube will be the first place that you'll see it, and then we'll post it on the initiative webpage. And I do see Helen. Hello. She had a quick question for the team. I'll give the team a little bit of a minute to read that, and she's from SMUD. Okay, let's see. So Helen's question is just a comment. It is important to separate, at least to be clear about the issues that are internal and interest CAISO BA. There were other issues that were important and relevant to the participating BAs within the EIM EDAM context. If issues on the table, we might have, Helen, if you can raise your hand, because there's a lot of information here. I want to make sure I don't miss it when I'm
Brenda,
saying
I
it.
think I have an understanding of the comments that Helen is making here in the chat, and I think it was also brought up in some other comments that we heard from some of our EIM, WEIM participants. And we are definitely aware that there are topics that may be very California-centric as it regards to resource adequacy, and then also WEIM, kind of relevant topics in this space that are more specific to the needs and to the participation within our EDAM and our real-time EIM market. We recognize those differences. What we didn't want to start off with in this working group is to separate you as stakeholders. We kind of wanted to start our working group as a, a village of stakeholders, all of us in this, so that everybody could understand everybody's perspective in terms of their participation needs. Because again, this is about market integration, and I always kind of think of it as market participation needs. So we wanted to start that conversation as a whole, holistically within the group, because we will find areas in which it affects both types of participation, WEIM as well as California BA specific. But then there may be times, and we've kind of thought of this within the working group process, where we might have to have, areas of splitting off that might focus on the RA context of participation and the WEIM context of participation with these type of resources. So just today is really just like bringing us all together to say we want to all work together in a working group. There's probably benefit to start the conversation, look at principles, look at problem statements all together. But we do recognize and we are flexible enough, and Juan, talks about the organic nature of this working group, and there will be flexibility within our schedules to potentially, have parallel efforts going on that are more specific to the needs of different types of stakeholders. So I just wanted to throw that out there to address Helen's comments as well as others.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. And also, there was another question about the how to receive notices on the meetings. I just added in the chat that you can subscribe to the daily briefing. That would also allow you to kind of see all the other activity within the ISO. As well, there's a separate link that fully focuses on this initiative to receive those notices, so you can save that and bookmark that onto your browser. And I do see a few folks from my team. Let them see if they want to add anything.
No, just thank you very much to everyone for the great engagement. I think what Jill said was wonderfully said. We do have that flexibility. We will be able to represent the varied stakeholders within this community. And we look forward to having this conversation with you all. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Juan. Let's go ahead and close our call to Ahmed. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time.